Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to St Margaret's for this Inspirational Women webinar. We're grateful to Aberdeen Standard Capital for their support of this series, and I'm particularly delighted to welcome award-winning journalist Melanie Reid as our guest this afternoon. Hello there, Melanie.
Hello, and hello everyone, and thank you very much for having me. I'll just to tell you a little bit about myself. I am still a journalist on the Times, I was a full-time working mum about 10 years ago, and my hobby, which I hadn't really been able to pursue as much as I wanted because I was bringing up my son, was horse riding, and he'd gone off to university, and so I was indulging my passion, which was trying to do some horse riding, and I was basically a middle-aged mum pretending that I was about 30, and I went out one day on a cross-country training exercise and with my horse, and I was very experienced. My horse was safe. I had all the precautions. It was an official training day, but my horse refused at a very small jump, and even though I was fit and strong and healthy, I went flying over his head, and I landed on my face on the other side of the jump, and my face planted in the ground, and my body kept on going, and I broke my neck. I also broke a vertebrae lower down in my back, but it was in my neck that the spinal cord was damaged, and so in a split second, I was still conscious, but I could feel everything went red, and my body was just suffused with this wonderful sort of warm glow. I felt lovely and warm, and my right arm still moved a little bit, and I managed to get my arm down, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move, and I couldn't feel my hand touching my legs, and that's when I knew it was serious. So I was airlifted to hospital, and it was, they talk about life change. It's a very handy euphemism, life-changing injuries, and in 2 seconds, my whole life had changed enormously because I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed from the neck down, and for the first few days in hospital, in fact, for the first 2 weeks, I was in intensive care, high dependency. I had an operation to stabilize my neck, and I was conscious, but they gave me a lot of morphine for the pain, and so I had no sense of really the reality of what had happened to me, and it meant that my poor old family were weeks ahead of me. They had been told that I wouldn't walk again, and I'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And when I came off the morphine and I went into the rehabilitation ward, this was in the Scottish Spinal Unit in Glasgow, I sort of opened my eyes in rehabilitation, and I had to catch up with everybody else and try and understand what had happened to me. And to some extent, I still am trying to understand what happened to me, because the psychological shock is enormous, because not only do you have to learn how to cope with a new body, but it's when you're going along happily and you think your life is on train tracks to have fun, have a good life, and everything is going to go well, and you're successful and smart, and everything's hunky-dory, and suddenly, whoomp, the train wreck happens, and you've lost everything, and it is a very profound shock. life jumps out and bites you on the bottom, and you have to learn how to cope with it, and it's huge. So I in the rehabilitation ward, when I first sort of came to, there was a lady in the next bed who was the same age as me, and freakishly had damaged her neck at the same level. But opposite us in the beds were two teenagers, one who was 15 and one who was 14. And the 14-year-old had, I tell you these stories not to depress anyone, but just to try and explain the random nature of life and the randomness of accidents. And there was a 14-year-old who had fallen off a seesaw in the play park, and the other girl had been out with her friends. She was a bit of a wild child, and she'd been out with her friends, and the person who was driving the car was a teenager too and went too fast, and the car had an accident, and she was on the back seat, and her spine was damaged. And so I watched them learn to cope with their new bodies and their new lives, and all around me was this incredible mixture of people from all walks of life. There were criminals and down and outs and drunks and people who'd been taking substances and tripped over the curb and broken their necks. And there were lawyers, there were top lawyers and top businessmen and women and teachers and policemen, and life is random, and in 2 seconds it can change. And we all had this wonderful thing in common. We all sat down together. I mean, you had the lawyers chatting to the criminals, because we were all in this together. We all had broken bodies, and we all had to learn how to cope with them. And often I found that the young kids were the most optimistic, and they were the ones that helped us the most, because they were just instinctively positive, and that was wonderful. But I had to learn. My hands were very damaged, and I had to learn how to. I was always lucky. I had to learn in the beginning how to hold a cup so that I could drink, and then how to hold a fork. In the beginning, I had the fork was strapped to my hand, and I'm very lucky. My body slowly recovered a little bit, so now my hands enable me I can drive myself, and I can put on mascara, little things like that the sort of things that you feel are human rights. When you have a profound physical accident, they're all taken away from you, and you have to slowly regain them. And you also have to learn in the spinal unit that you never take anything for granted anymore, and you never complain too much, because there's always somebody in a spinal unit who is much worse off than you are. I mean, there were people, some of my colleagues there who went home from the spinal unit, who were discharged, and they couldn't never feed themselves.
Yeah.
So what happened to me was awful, but it could have been very much worse. And that kind of held on to that for the last decade, and that has helped me to be positive enough to talk about my experiences like this, but also to try and help people appreciate their lives, I think.
Yeah, and we just get this sense, thank you, Melanie, for sharing that with us, the sense of, this being, you say, life-changing, and your perspective on what really matters changed through this? That's coming out already in what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, you realise all the little things that you used to get upset about, they don't matter at all. They absolutely don't matter. I think one of the loveliest things is I still to this day get letters from Times readers, from newspaper readers who say, thanks to you, I've stopped moaning about the fact that my teenage son leaves his wet towels on the floor. My daughter refuses to put her socks in the linen basket. Nobody else empties the dishwasher, because I realize that these things don't matter anymore because you've put everything in perspective. And I think when you have a healthy body, you forget. You get your troubles out of perspective. So it's good to sometimes think, hang on, this is not really something that I need to moan about.
Absolutely. We have read out extracts of spinal column in assembly before now, Melanie, picking up on that theme, so thank you for that. It's lovely to see there are questions coming in already from people watching elsewhere in school and at home, and I would just say to anybody who hasn't yet found the question function, it should be on the right hand side of your screen and you can put questions through that way. I'm just going to ask them, Melanie, you mentioned that your body has recovered sufficiently for you to be able to put on mascara, and that we don't appreciate our body until we actually don't have the use of it that we did. Has this changed your perspective on body image? Is there anything that you'd like to share with us about that?
How long have we got?
Well, as long as you like.
One of my profound wishes that came out of my experience has been that I wish I could have my time again, and I would appreciate what I had in a healthy body. I mean, when I was, 14, 15, 16, and you start to get self-conscious, and you start to become self-critical about your body. And when I look back, I have wasted so many years of my life being critical about my body, about I was too fat, I was too tall, I wasn't pretty enough, my clothes didn't look good enough, my hair wasn't blonde enough. I wasted years. I mean, I spent years on yo-yo diets. And if someone could have said to me early on, your body's beautiful because it works. Yeah. It works. You can run, you can climb hills. You have a fantastic thing in a working body. Don't fret about it, how it looks. You can smile, you can breathe, you can climb hills, you can run, you can do things, you can enjoy your body to its fullest. And we all take our bodies for granted. I don't mean to sound unrealistic here, but as a young woman, and right through into my 20s and 30s, I was far too self-critical and far too, I spent far too much time wishing that my body was different from what it was. And had I instead gone out and done more sport and just relished the fact that my skin, I had sensation in my skin, and I could bend down and put the lead on the dog and say, let's go for a walk. Let's pull on a pair of jeans. I can't wear jeans anymore. I wish I could wear jeans. I'd love to be able to wear jeans. It's and I don't mean to sound like I'm preaching, but I would love I'd love everybody who's young, who's watching this, to know that if you have a smile and your body works, you're beautiful. That's really what matters, you know.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us, because we know that is something that preoccupies lots of people, and sometimes it takes somebody else with a different experience to make us all think differently about things. And I've been a reader of your spinal column for many years, and the fact that you've kept writing throughout all of this, Melanie, and you've been so frank and so honest in what you've written, and we followed your story and your experiences. I mean, has your writing changed as a result of the accident? What part has the writing played in your life since then?
The writing, in the very beginning, the writing was a life raft. It was a way of making sense of things. It was a journalist's reaction. I mean, I remember my first, when I was in an MRI tube. I'd never been in an MRI scanner in my life before, and I had this you have a metal tube just a few centimeters from your nose, and you think, this is amazing. I need to write about this. This is an extraordinary experience. And in the beginning, I felt like a war correspondent on the front line of my own body. Sending dispatches, and I pressed send, and it was 18 months, 2 years before I actually read what I sent. Because it was too painful. It was a way of getting rid of the grief, to write it down, to express it. It also kept me in a job, which was important, because I was the main breadwinner, because my husband had retired, semi-retired by that time, and it gave me a purpose. It gave me back some of the old me.
Yes, yeah.
Because when something as profound as this happens, you search for your old identity. You search for little bits of you that you can try and start putting together again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So writing has. I mean, there are times, believe me, when a spinal column, I just think I have nothing left to say. There's nothing fresh that I can. But I think I'm one of the few people that gives disability a voice in the mainstream media.
Yes, yeah.
And that brings with it responsibility.
Yeah.
So I, as long as people want to read me, I try and keep going.
It strikes me that you do that in a way that's very measured and very thoughtful. And in school and in schools generally, we're always wanting to develop our sort of curriculum and how we talk to young people about disability, how we help people to understand. I mean, have you got any advice for us in that sense?
I spoke recently to the 14-year-old girl, the 15-year-old girl who was in the bed opposite me. She's now 25. She's married and she has a baby, which is a lovely story. But she went back to school, obviously, after she left hospital. And she found school profoundly difficult because the kids she was with didn't understand, and they weren't equipped either with help from their teachers, or they weren't equipped themselves emotionally to try and help her get over it, because none of them had seen anybody in a wheelchair before, because there aren't that many of us. And I think it's very hard if you don't know anyone who's disabled to understand quite how traumatic it is.
Yeah.
And to learn how to be sensitive about dealing with their problems, to learn not to be invasive, to learn not to upset them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, I think the best way that works for me personally, and probably the best advice I can give you as teachers and also all the girls, is that sense of be very honest with the disabled person and say, look, I can't imagine what it is like for you, but I'd like to help you if you would like me to help.
Yes.
I'll take my lead from you. If you need help, please tell me, or if there's anything I can do for you, please tell me. I won't invade or upset you. But if you tell me how I can help you, or if you tell me how you'd like to be called, or how what things upset you, if you tell me the names that I mustn't give to your condition, or I think there needs to be a complete frankness, this sense of laying yourself open to advice. Don't make any assumptions. And the other thing is, remember that inside, that person is like you.
Yes.
You know, they're still young, they still probably think of themselves as not disabled, depending on whether they've had a problem from birth. I mean, I sometimes, especially if I meet new people who didn't know me before my accident, I want to sort of, I kind of want to tap myself on the chest and say to them, look, inside, I feel just like you. Yeah, I'm still me in here. I don't feel that I'm a person who can't walk. You know, the real me is somebody you can't see. I feel just like you. I have the same wishes and desires and frustrations. I just need a bit more help getting around and addressing things. So, yeah, complete openness and good communication.
Yes, yeah. You've just been answering actually a question that's come in from somebody watching about how can you be a good friend to someone who's had a life-changing accident. Is there anything else you would want to add to that, Melanie? Because I mean, I think you've given a very full answer there to that.
I think the big thing is to try and use your imagination, be sensitive.
Yes, yeah.
I had some friends, I mean, my friends are wonderful, but there were some friends who just couldn't quite imagine, they couldn't quite understand the enormity of what had happened. I think they thought that in a few weeks, they could just carry on like normal. And it does require imagination. It does require sensitivity. But if you're open about these things, you'll get there and you won't lose those friendships. No. So just keep the communication channels open. Great. Okay. The questions are coming in thick and fast. Oh, if you had an hour with Nicola Sturgeon or Boris Johnson, what key issues from the disability rights agenda would you raise to improve lives? The built environment, accessibility.
Okay. Yeah.
If you think a pavement is flat, you think curbs are fine when you're able-bodied. You don't notice these things. You just don't notice these things. But it isn't until you're in a wheelchair and trying to get from one side of the road to the other, or get to go along a row of shops or something, that you realise it's like a cross country course.
I'm sure.
Like an obstacle.
I know.
It's like trying to go around badminton. It's you know, the lack of drop curbs. Things are improving, but it's the little things. It's people that park their cars in front of drop curbs. And do you know what I would love to do? I would have it in statute. I would make it compulsory for anyone that ran a corporation, any kind of a CEO of any kind of business above a certain number of employees. I would make it law that they had to spend a week in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Okay. And that would absolutely right. That would certainly have an impact. Of course it would. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially airline. I'd like to see the CEO of airlines in a wheelchair. Yeah.
Travel has inevitably been a difficult thing. I mean, I'm recalling times when you have travelled, and it's a big set of preparations, isn't it, to be able to go to some of the places that you've wanted to go to.
One of the blessings of lockdown has been not having to go anywhere.
Yes, absolutely, and everybody being in the same position as well.
In a funny way, I think everybody has tasted a little bit what it's like to be disabled or to
That's
have a chronic illness. Yeah.
Yes,
I think lockdown has given everyone a flavour of the isolation and the frustrations and the just the lack of opportunity, because there are many disabled people who are invisible because they choose not to go out because leaving their house is too difficult.
Just far too difficult. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to pass on a message to you here from one of the viewers, just to say, I find your journey fascinating. You've really helped me to ride the rough and smooth of a car accident and brain injury. Thank you, Melanie.
That's very, very sweet. Thank you very much. Well,
I know that you do get messages of this sort, but they're within our own school community as well. I've got a question in here about the charity Horatio's Garden. Melanie, this is a charity that you're involved in?
Yes. Now, there's quite a story behind this.
Okay.
Horatio's, it started after my accident, but there was a boy who died in very tragic circumstances. He was killed by a polar bear. His name was Horatio.
Yeah.
He was on a school trip.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was killed by a polar bear. And his mother was a GP, and his father is the spinal orthopedic surgeon at the Salisbury spinal unit. And they decided, in Horatio's memory, to because he'd worked at the spinal unit in Salisbury, and they decided in his memory to start a charity building gardens in spinal centres. And so that's what they did. And the second one they built was in the Scottish Glasgow Spinal Centre.
Yeah.
The Scottish Spinal Centre at the QEH in Glasgow. Now, when I was there, all there basically was sort of bare concrete. There was a horrible bare concrete courtyard that you couldn't get into because the door sills were just too high for people who were weak in a wheelchair. And round the side, there was just scrub land. There was nowhere to go when you wanted a good cry. There was no privacy. There was nowhere to go with your family. Olivia Chappell, Horatio's mum, it was as if someone came along and waved a magic wand over the Glasgow spinal unit. And from being this awful grey concrete desert, it is now the most beautiful, fabulous garden. And do you know, they've even, because it rains all the time in the west of Scotland, and you would get so wet if you were in a wheelchair outside. They even have pods, special glass pods with automatic sliding doors, so that if someone wants to go and have a good cry, or just to have a bit of solitude, they can go out in the garden and go in one of these glass pods and watch the rainfall and have some space and greenery and beauty. So wonderful.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's a terrific charity.
Really, really special. You were talking about having a good cry there, and inevitably that's been a necessary part of this journey. But when I was reading your book, which I'm going to just give a little plug for, The World I Fell Out Of, which both made me laugh and cry in parts. It was so clear that the staff in the spinal unit played a huge part in your experience in all sorts of ways. And a light has been shone on NHS staff during the pandemic, but you shine a light on people who day in, day out were working for the good of other people. So anything you'd like to say about the staff and that whole experience? Because I also got the impression again and again that you were observing individual people, individual staff, and there's a point where I thought you were really empathizing with them and seeing what their life was like.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I full of admiration for the staff, because it's a hard job.
Yeah.
And it's also, anyone who knows the west of Scotland knows the Glasgow sense of humour. And it was just wonderfully funny, even though it was tragic.
Yeah.
My time at the spinal unit, I spent more time laughing, because there's so many natural comedians. I mean, in the west of Scotland, there is a little bit of Billy Connolly in everyone, and they're naturally hilarious. And the QEH hospital is in Govan, which is of course Ramsey Nesbitt territory. It's the place where you get some of the darkest, funniest humour that I think in the world. And there were also many of the auxiliaries who worked there who did really all the hard work, the hands-on stuff, down the nitty-gritty. Many of them came from Govan, and they weren't. Many of them were single mums, and they were working these 12-hour shifts. It was hard work, and they gave so much. These women, and then the people that have the least gave the most. I found they were spectacularly wonderful. The caring, and the nurses who, again, they got a great deal out of it, and I found there were some of them that I could just sob on their shoulders. They were just so really decent people, and they gave us so much.
Yeah.
There were some. The NHS is like everyday life. You don't like everybody all the time. No. There were some that had I had a gun, I'd have shot them probably, but I shouldn't say that. But there were some that weren't the nicest. They were a bit sadistic, but they were a tiny minority. Most of them were. I wish my son had been bright enough to become a doctor. It's that sort of sense that you would want everyone who could to see how much you can contribute to society.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all seen that.
Yes.
We've all seen that,
Absolutely.
Over the pandemic. We've all learned the value of giving freely, of jobs about public service, about not doing it because it makes you money, but because you get a reward that that there is no price for.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your son there, and readers of the column, Dave and Dougie, we feel we've met them. How do they feel about featuring in this way? It was actually really lovely to see the pictures of them when I read the book.
Well, they're the reason I keep going. You do it for the people you love. You put on a brave face and a smile, and if you're a mum, you always keep going for your kids. I was profoundly grateful my accident happened to me and not to my son. That was a huge thing that made me cheerful, because I saw mums in the spinal unit who were coming in to visit their sons. And my son likes mountain biking, and he's an adrenaline boy like so many, and I was just glad it happened to me and not to him. And so you think, well, it could have been what happened to me could have been a lot worse. And I'll be as cheerful as I can and make things work as well as I can for their sake. And they reminded me of sort of a TV program, like sort of Band of Brothers or something, because neither of them, God bless them, were particularly good at the caring bit or the cleaning or but they were so kind, and they tried so hard, and they've been amazing. And it's what love is. It's what keeps you going. And my son is, he was at university when it happened, and he could so easily have dropped out. That was so hard for him, because he missed one set of exams, and then he failed them, because the shock and the trauma, it's not just you that have it, it's the people that you love that also suffer it. And he had the grit, he had the mental grit to go back and do his research, and he got his degree, and he flies planes for EasyJet. He's a pilot, and sometimes he flies over the house, and I sit and watch, and I sob. I go out, and he sends me a text saying, I'm going to be coming over the house flying over the house it's when he's flying to Inverness or Glasgow. And I go out into the garden, and I sit and cry.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because he came through. He survived. So it's great.
And no doubt inspired by you.
Well, I think when young people see that good stuff can come out of bad, when they see how you can cope, how there is always hope, and they see the power of love and positivity, because everyone has resilience in them, and hopefully most people don't get tested the way I got, the way our family was. But we've all got us in it. We've all got us in it to
do that.
Bad stuff.
And to anybody watching just now who perhaps is in an earlier stage of this sort of experience, Melanie, as a family, is there any advice you would give to them?
Remember that it will get better. that you will learn to cope better. You will if it's a spinal injury, that your hands will probably improve, even if you're a tetraplegic, because hands are brilliant at improving. But also remember that there is always joy to be found in watching other people, watching your children, your friends be successful, and there is always joy somewhere. There are always things to look for that will help you.
Yeah.
And I never give up, never stop hoping.
Thank you. Yeah.
Things always get better. You always think they're so bad, but they always get better, and there is always somebody who's worse off. And it's peer group support can be very useful.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure.
If you phone someone who's also in a wheelchair, I have a friend who was in the unit with me. Who he's a PE teacher. He went back to work, and he referees rugby in his wheelchair. He's amazing.
Wow.
And he and I can chat. I'll have a chat with him if I need inspiration or to laugh at something that's happened.
Yeah, he's a good person to go to.
Yeah.
Thank you. Taking the conversation back to journalism, we've got a question come in, I think, from a would-be journalist. What advice would you give to young people wishing to go into journalism today?
Okay. It's much tougher now than it was when I went into journalism, which is heading for 40 years ago. But I would suggest, if you can, instead of studying, doing a degree in media studies or journalism, I know that these are available now. I would suggest that you take a degree in politics or history, or even economics, because these are subjects. These are good, hard subjects that will give you a hinterland that when you do go into journalism, they give you a depth and a breadth of knowledge which will inform your journalism, and it's also a good fallback. I think it makes you a much broader person.
Okay.
There are lots of postgraduate journalist courses.
Yes.
You don't have to go that way. You can go into local journalism, but it's a tough job now because local journalism is not doing so well. The outlets are much narrower, and digital journalism is another outlet which I know less about, but I do know it's very hard work. I'm mentoring someone at the moment she's a fantastically bright 25-year-old who has a first-class degree in English, who did a master's in James Joyce, who writes beautifully, and she's rafting away doing 12-hour shifts for an online digital news channel. And it's really hard graft. And I'm trying to help her find jobs that will suit her obvious intellect and abilities. But the opportunities are hard. So my advice is keep your scope as wide as you can.
Wide as possible. Yeah.
And the other thing is keep writing. Whatever you your pupils should write and write and write. Express yourself. Do creative writing. Try and be as succinct as possible. Drop the waffle. Forget about waffle. Try and condense what you say. Make it accessible. Make it exciting. Read good journalists. Read good news stories and columnists, and ask yourself, why am I enjoying this? Why does this work for me? And try and copy people's styles.
Yeah, read critically is what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah.
Read critically, yes. I mean, I studied English. I didn't take my own advice because I didn't know that.
No.
But I studied English at Edinburgh, and I, from writing 8,000 word essays, I then had to go and write, 400 word stories. And the discipline involved in that is immense.
Yeah.
It's a huge challenge. And it's really, if you love words, if you love writing, it's very exciting. I love the art of condensing and throwing out unnecessary words.
Yes.
It's very good.
And who's inspired you as a writer? Because you're encouraging us to read, writers that we admire. Who would have shaped you in that way?
I love anything that Matthew Paris writes.
Yeah.
It's wonderful in the Times. Tom Whipple, the science editor.
Yes.
So brainy. He's fabulous. He's very brainy, but he's able to make it very accessible.
Understandable, yeah.
Yeah. There's a woman who writes for the Guardian, called Marina Hyde.
Yes, yeah.
Is quite the most brilliantly funny, sarcastic writer I've ever read. Also in the Times, Janice Turner, very political.
Yeah.
Very political, but again, a great writer. These are the people I admire.
I remember you reflecting on some of your reading as a child in the book, going back to stories of Pollyanna, etc.
Well, everyone needs a dose of Pollyanna when something like this happens.
Yeah.
So look to the best things. Funnily enough, I've just been writing a review of a book about Carson McCullers, the American.
Yeah.
The American wrote some American classics, and why I enjoyed it so much is reading it as a teenager. And I reread some of it last night, and it's actually fantastic looking at the books that form you as a young adult. To Kill a Mockingbird, and for some reason I loved American literature. I love books about tomboys, because I couldn't find books that were about. I was never a girly girl, and I could never find books that were about girls who wanted to do things and be outdoorsy and sporty.
I think the range of literature that's available to younger people today is much greater. It's much more diverse. Yeah,
I'm sure it's massive now. I mean, it was very limited by comparison. Yeah.
And horses have been an important part of your life, along with writing. And today, do you have any involvement with horses today, Melanie?
I don't. It hurts too much.
Too much, yeah.
I did go back. I tried writing for the disabled.
Yeah.
Loving it. It was going brilliantly. It really helped my torso. I was able to be hoisted onto a horse, and my physiotherapy was going brilliantly. But it all ended badly. The horse took off, and I, even though it was riding the disabled horse, you can still fall off them, and I broke my hip. I went through a lot of pain and humiliation, if I'm honest. I felt a complete plonker, you know, for doing it the second time, and I thought, no, I can't put myself through this, or my family through this anymore. So I have a friend who has some really top level, beautiful dressage horses, and once in a blue moon, for a treat, I go and watch her exercising them. Yeah. But it's a little bit too poignant. Yeah, I'm sure. Because it's my lost love affair. Yes. You know? Yeah. I still miss the smell and the noise of horses. But I would, if you ask me, would I have not done it if I got the chance again? Then I definitely would. I would have done it all over again. I mean, it was great. They're wonderful things, and so nobody should stop riding. Yeah. Maybe just when you get to your middle age, stop going over the jumps. Or wear air jackets. Everybody should wear air jackets now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I know there'll be people watching for whom horses are a part of their life. Yeah. Melanie, the person putting this message in has taken the words out of my mouth. She's thanking you for raising awareness of so many issues in your column, and saying that you are an inspiration. We've really been enjoying this Inspirational Women series, but I know that everybody watching today will just have been so struck by your honesty, your compassion, your humanity, and you know, the gift you've given us today of having an insight into your experiences, but also helping us to put our own lives in a bigger context. And I think if ever I've met an inspirational woman in my life, Melanie, it's you. So on behalf of everybody watching, can I just thank you so very, very much indeed. It's really been a privilege. It's been a privilege for me to talk to you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Take care now. Okay, goodbye, and thank you to all our viewers as well, and everybody who has submitted a question. We've really appreciated that. Okay, bye, everyone. Bye bye. Good night. Bye, bye. And goodbye. Bye, bye. Okay, bye bye now.